Crisis! 5-alarm fire! What do we do?
I don't know.
If you're a company and you've been in this spot before, it's probably not new. You've probably had a crisis at some point in time, maybe a big one, maybe a small one, but the big ones are the ones that take the most effort to manage, and you got to be really kind of diligent about how you manage them. So, Derek, what do we know about crisis comms? We don't know anything about crisis comms, do we?
No, we've only worked with several different premiers and provincial governments and businesses and all types
Never
of
any
things.
crises during those years in government.
No
Never.
fires or floods
Or oil spills or anything.
or massive tragedies or pandemics, none of that happening. So we have no experience in this. Since we have no experience, let's just talk about
These events? Yes. When they happen?
Yeah, when they happen. So here's what I've noticed in crisis communications that's fundamentally important for any business or person to know. The number one thing is you can't rely on other people to communicate your message in a crisis. That's almost in any situation, but especially in a crisis.
Right. You can have a vehicle for your message to help communicate it, but you can't rely on somebody else to be carrying your message for you unless you give them the message to begin with.
Correct. Yeah. So I fully endorse the idea that you have to have your messaging on a daily basis during a crisis on your website and on your social media channels. It should be clearly laid out. So I think the mistake that I've seen governments make over the years is they'll do a media availability, where it's like you invite all the media and you have all your experts on there and they share some information. And that is very good, and the media will report it, and that's helpful. But then all of a sudden, people are trying to look for the information on your website, on your social media channels, and there's nothing there. And so they're trying to go through different media stories, trying to find things. Not helpful.
And you're there wondering, well, what the heck? I gave the info to media. What more do they want? What more do the public want? They have everything. Why can't they just do my work for me?
Yes.
21st century tip, you have to do a lot of your own work yourself these days.
Yes, unfortunately. So what's another thing in modern crisis communications that we need to worry about?
So I think one thing you have to be aware of is that people in a situation or a crisis, people are always looking to you. They're wondering, they're looking to you first. They're browsing on your social media feed, or they're looking in the news, and they're trying to identify what you've said about the crisis. If they care about the crisis, they're trying to figure out what is my representative or my head of X company or my MLA said about this issue.
Let me guess, you probably need a spokesperson.
Yes, you do.
So I think your spokesperson has to do a number of things. They have to be caring, they have to be empathetic, and they have to be clear in their communication.
Yes.
I think they also have to be, they must have some sort of credibility too. So, if the person's a doctor, if they're a high-level safety official of some sort, they have to have some experience and credibility to back up what you're saying. And I don't think you want to have a new spokesperson every day.
No.
I think people will start to rely on the same spokesperson over time. And we've seen that in the pandemic. That could be good, that could be bad, depending on your spokesperson. But I think you want to stick to a spokesperson. And if they're bad, or if people start to not trust them, get rid of them.
There is consistency in having a public spokesperson that is a regular kind of appearance or a show, whether it's in a written document, whether it's on TV, whether it's in radio, whatever the forum might be. It's very helpful to have that consistency, that knowledgeable nature, that credibility that person brings to the updated information of the briefing that they're offering to the public.
So have a great spokesperson and use them all the time. I also think you should use them for number 3, is to debunk misinformation. So talk about misinformation that you've seen during a crisis.
So this is an oldie but a goodie, for an example. So when we had an oil spill happen in Saskatchewan way back in the day, I remember we figured out kind of the
North Saskatchewan River, right?
Well, it was, and I remember we figured it was near the North Saskatchewan River, and we figured out exactly kind of how to communicate around the oil spill, the details the public needed to know on a regular daily basis. The biggest issue I think that we saw was people chiming in or quickly on social media to talk about what they saw X here or X there, and they thought it might meant that the oil had spread in this area, or that this was a new revelation or development in the issue. So one that I saw circulating on social media widely, or that we all saw, was there's a section in the North and South Saskatchewan rivers where they join or where they meet.
They collide, yeah.
Where I believe, again, I'm drawing from my memory here, but one carries sediment down the river.
I remember that too.
And the thought was, when people had seen these images sort of from I think it was a drone or a helicopter, they thought that the river was carrying oil from the North Saskatchewan into the South Saskatchewan, was going to pollute the entire kind of watershed. And
that's a big part of Saskatchewan.
It is a big part.
It would be a huge issue.
It would be a big issue if it was to happen. And of course, on the North Saskatchewan was where the oil was leaking at one point in time, or in the North Saskatchewan. And so they had figured out a way to mitigate it sort of downstream for the towns that were affected, but they were worried that, well, if it had spread at this point, then it would affect the entire watershed. So we debunked that very quickly and said no.
Because there was a picture online that was going viral, I remember,
showing clearly the actual color discoloration in one side of the river versus the other side. Yeah. And it looked like it was carrying oil into.
It really did look like it. And so I remember,
if you were unaware,
we had to have the spokesperson go out and say, here's the picture everyone's talking about, and it's not true. This is sediment, this is not oil. And so if you're not active on social media and you don't have a spokesperson, you're not monitoring social media to see what's going viral, you're going to miss out big time.
Yeah.
And you're going to have massive problems. Because I think when there's an information vacuum, it'll get filled by crazies on the internet. So you have to be very careful in a crisis to monitor everything that's going on and quickly respond to it.
And like, to be clear as well, like, not everybody who's spreading information is a crazy. Like, they're trying to also kind of share.
You're right.
They think they're being a good citizen by sharing things that they've seen on the internet, and they're trying to kind of spread the word because they don't see any other information to the contrary.
That's right.
So that happened a lot during the pandemic, where you saw people sharing different things here and there, and we had, of course, daily briefings at points, and sometimes multiple times a day, depending on how the information would shift. So we had to make very calculated decisions about what information would be shared with the public when. And the idea was to share as much as possible, of course, but with information changing so quickly, you have to be mindful as well when you're sharing information in a crisis comm scenario to be very careful about what you're sharing when, being as transparent as you can with the public so that they don't fill information elsewhere that they found on the internet. And that you respond to people honestly, empathetically, and accurately when they come forward with questions.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's something that MASH is advertising that we do now. We've always done it, but we've never advertised that we do crisis communications. But it's something in politics that you have to do. If you're in government, there's always going to be some sort of crisis in the term of a premier or prime minister. And even in a business, you're going to go through a time of crisis, and you want someone that can give you clarity, a roadmap, and respond to issues with lightning speed so that you don't get into trouble and you can manage this crisis in a way that could actually bring you closer to your community, closer to your constituents and your stakeholders if you manage it right. If you don't, bad things can happen.
Speed is really critical too. Like, the faster you are responding to things, the faster you can debunk or get ahead of certain crises that will stem from your current crises. So just know that speed is really kind of your biggest ammunition when you're able to get information out.
Yeah. So crisis communications, be ready for it, and call Paul or Derek or one of our other amazing strategists if you need help.